Hey everyone, today I'm going to go over the spell changes for prop values in Cataclysm. Possibly the biggest change to prop values is the addition of a new resource called Holy Power. These are essentially combo points, but they cap at 3 instead of 5 and are built on the pally, not their target. You'll gain Holy Power as a prop value through a few different sources. The most basic sources are Crusader Strike and Hammer of the Righteous. Crusader Strike is now a baseline spell all paladins have, and for prop values it only has a 3-second cooldown. Hammer of the Righteous has also had its cooldown reduced to 3 seconds and does percent weapon damage to your target and an AoE to everything within 8 yards instead of just hitting 2 to 3 extra targets like in Wrath. Crusader Strike and Hammer of the Righteous share a cooldown, so Crusader Strike is only used for single target and Hammer of the Righteous is only used for AoE. I'll have a separate video coming out going over the rotation, so look out for that. Another source of Holy Power generation is Divine Plea, due to the Shield of the Templar talent, which will cause Divine Plea to instantly generate 3 Holy Power. There's also another talent, Grand Crusader, that when procced will cause your next Avenger Shield to generate a Holy Power. The final way prop values can generate Holy Power is through the Pursuit of Justice talent, giving 1 Holy Power anytime you're struck by a stun, fear, or immobilizing effect. Now we know how to generate Holy Power, but what do we actually use it for? There are 3 abilities that consume Holy Power: Shield of the Righteous, Inquisition, and Word of Glory. Shield of the Righteous is your main single target Holy Power spender, dealing significantly more damage per Holy Power used. It no longer has a cooldown, but the Holy Power requirement is effectively the cooldown. Inquisition is a new ability that gives plus 30% holy damage for 4 seconds per Holy Power spent. The final Holy Power spender is Word of Glory. This is an instant cast heal with a 20-second cooldown. So your Holy Power spender choices basically boil down to threat or survivability. Avenger Shield is now a 15-second cooldown instead of 30 seconds and will silence and interrupt by default. It no longer slows targets, but there's a glyph to add the slow back if you want that. It also does quite a bit more damage than it did in Wrath relative to other abilities. Hammer of Wrath doesn't really change, but it has a new icon now. Judgment of Wisdom, Light, and Justice have been removed and been replaced with simply Judgment. It now has an 8-second cooldown by default instead of a 10-second cooldown with talents to bring it lower. It's also now one of your main sources of mana return through the Judgments of the Wise ability that prop values get baseline. Every time you use Judgment, you'll regen 30% of your base mana over 10 seconds, which scales with haste to restore mana quicker. There's also a talent that can increase the range of Judgment by 20 yards for 2 points for a total of 30 yards. Consecration has some significant changes. It now lasts 10 seconds instead of 8 and has a 30-second cooldown instead of 8. On top of that, it costs a whopping 55% of base mana. Its damage relative to other abilities is a little lower now. However, Consecration ticks can now crit. There's an optional talent in the Prot tree, Hallowed Ground, that reduces the mana cost by 80% and increases the damage by 40% for 2 points. Holy Wrath is now a 15-second cooldown and does damage to all mob types, but only stuns undead and demons. There's a glyph that makes it stun elemental and dragon types as well. Those are all the changes to the rotational abilities. Check back soon for another video focused on the new rotation. Let's now look at auras and seals. The only real change to auras is that Shadow, Fire, and Frost resistance auras have all been combined into one new aura called Resistance Aura. Seal of Vengeance and Seal of Corruption have been renamed to Seal of Truth. It works pretty much the same way as it did before, except the dot component now scales with haste and can crit. Seal of Command has been removed as a spell, but Ret still has a talent called Seal of Command that causes Seal of Righteousness to hit all nearby targets. However, it is now too far down the Ret tree for prop values to get. Our days with Seal of Command are over. Seal of Justice can no longer stun. Instead, it just procs the reduced max move speed debuff that used to be from Judgment of Justice. Seal of Light and Wisdom have been combined into the new Seal of Insight. While leveling and soloing, you'll use this quite a bit, but in raids it isn't really used. Moving on now to Blessings and Hands. In Kata, the number of buffs and debuffs gets reduced a bit, and more people can bring each one. This was done in an effort to push the bring the player, not the class style of raid design. Blessing of Might and Wisdom have been combined, but the buff is called Blessing of Might. It now gives 20% attack power instead of a static amount, as the static attack power buff type has been removed, and it gives mana per 5, just like the old Blessing of Wisdom. Be prepared because you will have an endless amount of casters telling you that you gave them the wrong buff because they don't realize Blessing of Might is now combined with Wisdom. Blizzard really should have changed the name and icon for this to avoid confusion. Blessing of Kings has been changed to give 5% Strength, Agi, Stam, and Int instead of 10% to all those plus Spirit. It also gives Resist All that does not stack with most other resist buffs like Resistance Aura and Totem. The new version of Kings is basically just a fusion between the old Kings and Mark of the Wild. Mark is the exact same buff as Kings in Kata. Blessing of Sanctuary no longer exists, but there's a new passive talent that replaces it to give us mana back on blocks and dodges. So now we only have 2 total blessings to buff, Kings and Might. None of the hand spells really get changed on their own, but there are a couple changes that affect them. Forbearance now lasts only 1 minute, down from 2, making Hand of Protection usable on a target more frequently if you have multiple pallies. Hand of Salvation also now has a glyph that removes the gradual permanent threat drop and instead causes the target to generate 0 threat for the duration. This can be useful for allowing a DPS to go hard on an ad or ads you won't have much threat on. Now let's look at the changes to cooldowns. One of the biggest changes is Divine Protection, which gets a new icon and now reduces damage by 20% instead of 50%, but it also only has a 1 minute cooldown, down from 2 minutes, and doesn't cause forbearance. There's also a glyph you can use that causes it to no longer reduce physical damage, but increase the magic damage reduction by 20% for 40% total reduction. We now also have a new ability called Guardian of Ancient Kings, which is our new wall ability, reducing damage taken by 50% for 12 seconds with a 3-minute cooldown. This does not cause forbearance. Ardent Defender has been changed from a passive to an active ability. It now reduces damage taken by 20% for 10 seconds, and the first attack you take that would normally kill you will instead heal you for 15% of your max HP. The cooldown has also been increased from 2 minutes to 3 minutes. Anyone who played Prot and Wrath knows how OP the old Ardent Defender was, and it definitely needed to get nerfed. This new version still feels great while being a lot more balanced. Holy Shield has been completely redesigned. It's now a 30-second cooldown that increases the amount you block for by 20% instead of giving block chance and having a much shorter cooldown. Blocks now reduce damage taken by 30% by default instead of a static amount like before. There's also a meta gem that gives plus 1% block damage reduction, so Holy Shield bumps block damage reduction up to 50% without the meta gem and 51% with it. For more information on stat changes, check out my stat changes in Cataclysm video. I'll have it linked in the video description. Divine Shield has had its duration reduced from 12 seconds to 8 seconds. It also gets a new icon. Avenging Wrath is now a 2-minute cooldown instead of 3, and no longer has a 30-second hidden forbearance effect. Lay on Hands now has a 10-minute base cooldown, down from 20 minutes. The glyph for it now reduces the cooldown by 3 minutes instead of 5. Lay on Hands will also put forbearance on any target it's cast on instead of just when self-cast like in Wrath. Divine Sacrifice has been renamed to Divine Guardian and changed a bit. It's now a 3-minute cooldown up from 2 minutes and no longer transfers damage at all, only reduces damage by 20%. The damage reduction will also no longer affect the casting Paladin, only their raid and party members. Divine Plea now has a 2-minute cooldown up from 1 minute and restores 12% mana over 9 seconds instead of 25% mana over 15 seconds. Prot values no longer have a talent that will continually refresh this, but we do get a talent that causes Divine Plea to give us 3 charges of holy power, as I mentioned before. It's mainly used on the pull to start with Inquisition or throw an immediate Shield of the Righteous. There's no longer a glyph that causes it to give a small damage reduction when active either. It's now pretty much purely a snap holy power generator, and the mana portion is irrelevant. Now we'll look at some of the miscellaneous spell changes. Righteous Fury now increases all threat generation by 500%, up from plus 80% holy threat and the hidden plus 43% additional all threat from Wrath. This makes threat generation incredibly easy. There's also a new passive spell all tanks get called Vengeance. Basically, as you take damage, you get a percentage of that damage taken as a stacking attack power buff. The maximum attack power you can get is equal to your stamina plus 10% of your base HP. But that isn't what the tooltip says, is it? Well, you're not going to believe this, or maybe you will if you played the game a long time, but the tooltip is intentionally wrong because it's shorter than saying how Vengeance actually works. Also, the first hit that the tank takes will give attack power equal to 33% of the damage taken, and as Vengeance updates, it will never go below 33% of the damage taken in the last 2 seconds. Another new passive spell prop allies get is Touched by the Light, which used to be talented. It gives 60% conversion of strength to spell power like it did before, but also gives plus 15% stam and 8% spell hit. Hand of Reckoning no longer does damage under any circumstance. Both Hand of Reckoning and Righteous Defense can no longer miss, along with all other taunts. Prot Pallies finally get an interrupt, Rebuke. This is a 10-second cooldown that locks the school for 4 seconds. It's off the GCD and cannot miss, a change made to all non-damaging interrupts in Cata. Cleanse sadly will no longer remove magic for Prot Pallies, only poison and disease. The magic removal from Cleanse is now on a talent that's deep in the Holy Tree. Exorcism no longer has a cooldown. This isn't super relevant most of the time at max level, but it can be pretty hilarious in low level PGs when you just spam Exorcism people to death from 30 yards away as a prop pally. Pally healing gets changed quite a bit in Cata. We don't heal much as prop pallies, but occasionally there are opportunities to. Flash of Light now heals for about twice as much as Holy Light, but it costs about 3 times more mana. It's the quickest way to get a good heal when mana isn't a concern. Holy Light is a slower, more efficient heal. There's also a new heal, Divine Light, which costs a little bit more than Flash of Light, but heals for a lot more and has a longer cast time. Another new heal is Holy Radiance, which heals the target and anyone within 10 yards of them, and also pulses some additional healing every second for 3 seconds after, which scales with haste. This is something you could throw while you're not currently tanking to help with a period of heavy AoE raid damage. That should cover all of the spell changes for prop allies in Cataclysm. I'll have future videos going over the rotation, talents, and glyphs, so look out for those. If you want to support me, you can help me out by liking, commenting, and subscribing. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.